That smokehouse had been on my ranch long before the HOA existed. I used it for family gatherings, weekend cookouts, and storing my own equipment. There was never any question about who owned it until the HOA board suddenly decided otherwise. Linda told me the HOA needed to inspect my smokehouse. I asked her what part of my private property belonged to the HOA. She didn't answer the question. She simply said the board had made its decision. I told them clearly that they did not have permission to enter. The smokehouse was private property. Linda became furious and said the board didn't need my permission. That's when I knew this wasn't going to end with a simple argument. A few hours later, they came back. This time they weren't asking me anything. They walked straight toward the smokehouse as if my refusal meant nothing. I decided to let them make their next mistake. Then Linda opened the smokehouse door. Karen and Susan followed her inside. They were officially trespassing now, and they had no idea I was already documenting everything. I didn't shout at them. I didn't touch anyone. I simply closed the door and secured the outside latch. Then I made one very important phone call. I called the county sheriff's office. I explained exactly what had happened. Then I told the women they would have to wait where they were. I wasn't going to turn this into a shouting match. Linda started demanding that I open the door. She said I was embarrassing the HOA board. I reminded her that they had entered without permission. She suddenly stopped sounding quite so confident. A few minutes later, the sheriff's SUV pulled into my driveway. Deputy Brooks stepped out and walked straight toward the smokehouse. Linda suddenly became very quiet. She knew the situation had changed completely. Deputy Brooks looked at me and asked what had happened. I showed him the property records and the security footage. Then he looked at the locked smokehouse. His next question was directed at Linda. Why were you inside? Linda immediately claimed the smokehouse needed an HOA inspection. She said the board believed there were violations inside. Deputy Brooks asked her to show him the inspection order. Linda had nothing except a clipboard and a very confident attitude. I handed Deputy Brooks the deed and property survey. The smokehouse was clearly inside my private boundary. There was no HOA easement giving them access. The paperwork made that very clear. Then I showed him the security footage. The cameras had captured the entire incident. They showed the board arriving, entering, and refusing to leave. Linda couldn't argue with footage that had timestamps. Deputy Brooks inspected the door and the entry point. He asked who had opened it. All three women suddenly started blaming each other. That was when their story began falling apart. Karen finally admitted they had entered after I told them not to. She said Linda had instructed them to inspect the building. Linda immediately denied giving that order, but the cameras had already recorded their conversation. One by one, their explanations stopped matching. The documents contradicted their claims. The camera footage contradicted them too. There wasn't much left for Linda to argue. After documenting everything, Deputy Brooks told me to open the door. I stepped aside and let him handle the situation. The three women walked out looking very different from when they arrived. Their confidence had disappeared. Deputy Brooks made the rules very clear. They could not enter my private property without permission or legal authority. The HOA's title didn't give them special powers over my ranch. Linda finally had to accept that. Linda and the board finally left my property. They arrived believing they could order me around. They left after being warned by the sheriff himself. The smokehouse was still mine, and the evidence was safely documented. That day taught the HOA a lesson they should have learned before stepping onto my land. A board can make rules, but it cannot simply invent ownership. My property records, security cameras, and the sheriff settled the matter. And from that day forward, everyone knew one simple rule. My smokehouse, my property, my rules.